And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
I'm a big fan of the Memoir 44 game, as evidenced by my big campaign bag here full of all the different stuff, different campaigns. Really enjoy it. I still feel that it is the best game based on World War II in existence, even though it's fairly light. There's just so much that's able to be done with the system, and it's so much fun to play. I really enjoy it. One of the disadvantages to the game, perhaps, is the fact that the original game only came with a certain amount of scenarios, although if you go online, you can find tons of them. And Days of Wonder just released a scenario editor, which is going to make it even easier to find more scenarios. But it's still nice to have, I guess, what you might say, a professional design scenarios for you. Well, it's with great pleasure that I was able to get a hold of the campaign book, Volume 1 for Memoir 44, because this is just, to me, exciting on many levels, not the least being that there are 51 more scenarios in here to play. Let's take a quick tour through the book and see what's inside it. When we first open up the book, we find the rules to how to play a campaign, because what this book allows you to do is it allows you to string together several different battles into a campaign. And it talks about how to do that, how to read the book and use it. Then there's a few game components that are included with the game. Some new obstacles, the mortar and anti-tank gun, and some new tokens, and explains how to use those. But then it gets into the meat of the game, which is a campaign. Now, in this book, it allows you to play a grand campaign, which takes several smaller campaigns and string them together. For example, the first grand campaign is the Battle of Normandy. That's the first one in here, and that one is actually 4 smaller campaigns put together. Each battle, this grand campaign, has special notes for it. But here's where the book gets really interesting. If you look here, this shows you how the campaign works to some degree. You play the first battle here, and then if the Axis win, they go to this campaign. And then if they win, they go to this campaign. And if they win, then they win the whole game, basically. Or they go to one final battle and they win the game. Same thing over here on the other page, but it's the Allies. So there is some difference in how that works. Some campaigns, it doesn't matter who wins or not, they will still go to the next battle. But for example, here the Allies, if the Allies win the third battle, they win the game. And they only go to the fourth battle if they lose the third battle. Then on the next pages are the different scenarios themselves. It tells you the scenario, tells you what happens. This is just like every other game in existence, but what I really like is just how there are so many of these scenarios all throughout the book, and they're very different, and they're some of the major battles of the war. And so that's a lot of fun. There's a way then to score the grand campaign at the end. You can see that some campaigns, like the Barbarossa campaign here, is much more convoluted, and depending on who wins or loses what battle, you go around. And to me, that's just amazingly fun. There's just so much variety here, and you can play Memoir for a really long time because of this. One of the things that this game includes are a whole bunch of reserve tokens that are used in the campaigns. At the beginning of each campaign, each player is given a certain number of reserve tokens. So let's say the German player gets 3 reserve tokens. They have these to use throughout the campaign. At the beginning of each scenario, they're going to roll 2 dice, and whatever they roll on those dice, if they roll, for example, an infantry unit, they are allowed to use one of the reserve tokens and bring in an infantry unit as a reserve token. Just the same as they roll a tank, they're able to bring in a tank unit as a reserve. Again, that if they roll, for example, a tank and an infantry, they could bring in one of both, but they would have to use 2 of the reserves, and you only have 3 for that whole campaign. When you bring a unit onto the board, you can do it in 2 different ways. You can either bring it on immediately, discarding the reserve token, and putting the unit somewhere in the back row. Or you can decide that you're going to keep the unit in a staging area. If you do that, you only put 1 token there, along with the reserve token. As the scenario progresses, when you lose pieces of that same type, they're put there. Once the unit's fully together, you can use a card and bring them on the board where they can start attacking. Now, why would you do that? The reason is, if you win the scenario, you haven't brought this unit onto the board at all, you are allowed to remove them, and you get to keep that token. If you lose the scenario, you can't do that. So there's a bit more of a risk when you put units in a staging area, but there's a chance that you might get the token back. While if you put it here, you know you have it for sure. I'm more of a for sure type of guy, but again, it depends on the general commanding the armies. There's a few other rules. Whenever you roll an asterisk and an infantry unit together, you can bring on an elite infantry unit. Those are the ones that can move 2 spaces and still attack. Or if you roll the star and the tank, you can bring on an elite tank force, which has 4 tanks, and if you've played Memoir before, you know just how wonderful that is. If you roll double stars, you can bring on an elite type of either tanks or infantry, and it doesn't even cost you a reserve token, so that's really neat. And there's a few other rules that are included. For example, if you roll a flag, you can bring on some sandbags, and each campaign also has maybe different combinations of dice that if you roll them, you can do something specific. There's a few more interesting things that the game includes. For example, if you win certain battles, you get to a victory roll, and that has some bearing on your next battle, and that's a nice way to show how attrition and things from one battle affect the next. Also, there's a certain way to keep score. There's different objectives that you have to complete in each campaign, and however many of those you complete, you get a certain amount of points, and whoever has the most points at the end can win. And that's basically it for the game. It includes a few cards, and it includes a few more tokens for special rules that are used in the game. Some of them we've seen before, like the paratroopers and anti-tank guns, but if that's all you've wanted for the game, and this is still a nice addition to it, and I would say the book is worth it just for the 51 scenarios alone. Really, this book has taken Memoir 44 to the next level. I already thought that Memoir 44 was a fantastic game simply because of the Overlord scenarios where you could play 4 players and 4 players, and that's fun. But this really lets 2 players really just have a fantastic time of it. I mean, for one thing, 51 more scenarios. That's going to be enough for some people just to buy it, because you can take it, open the book to any one of these scenarios, and play it. And you don't really need a whole lot to play it. Most of the scenarios in here involve only the basic game. There are several that use the Eastern Front with the Russians, and some that refer to terrain that's found in the terrain pack. But other than that, you won't need anything else for this book. The campaigns themselves are a lot of fun. I don't usually have enough time to play the grand campaign, 16 battles in a row, but that is something that you can do over time. But playing through a campaign itself is a really interesting idea. I really like how the reserve tokens make you decide, am I going to bring in reserves now, or should I save them for a future battle? Or if I don't bring them in now, maybe I'll fall so far behind that future battle's not going to matter much anyway. And I really enjoy how the game works like that. And it comes with a book, it comes with some tokens, and a few cards that show special rules. These cards were introduced in the Air Pack, and it just adds some more rules, and these are nice additions to the game. So, if you like Memoir at all, and you're looking for more, this is fantastic. I hope that they continue to do it, and I guess if there's anything I enjoy about this the most, it's the fact that this is the campaign book, Volume 1. Will we see campaigns in the Pacific? Will we see more campaigns in the Eastern Front? Will we see campaigns in the Mediterranean? I'm sure they're on their way, and I hope they're as good as this one was.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.